Yeah, so the idea of flags wouldn't have worked, because for flag semaphore, the diagrams are a little man holding flags, so again, it had to be translated into something else. So, signal flag semaphore is a different thing. That is what you see on the building, is different colourful symbols. And I just think that as visually it would look quite nice, and there's something nice about a hidden meaning or something. It's not necessarily hidden, it's just something that you would need to make more of an effort to read than just 2 seconds.
Because if it just
the case with an advertisement.
If it just said view,
yeah,
it kind of doesn't serve the same purpose. We were hoping people might see it and try and work out for themselves what the word might mean. And actually, I forgot to tell our business services staff when the exhibition first opened. What does it mean? What does it mean?
It was an F word.
It was F and a U. And one of them, John, said to me, "I've been watching Bellevue, and Semaphore, and that isn't quite
it's
right."
It's not explained in the film.
And so he was trying to, he was saying, "Is it meant to not be quite perfect?" And I said, "Oh, it is okay, fine." And he spent some time himself researching because he wanted to know more. And in some ways, that's where I think this commission was really successful, in that people want to find out more about what this strange, because it looks a bit like flags, but obviously it's not national flags, and hopefully people can see it and then ask questions about it.
And I suppose even starting off with the Lowry novel, it's kind of his concerns come out of the sea in a way, and his starting point on the Wirral, and sailing off from Liverpool,
and it's almost like
early life as a sailor.
And it's like a beacon, because we're up on the hill, you can see it. I've checked, you can see our building from the Wirral and from down on the docks. So it's got that maritime element in Lowry and Liverpool,
sure.
And the history of the city and even our institution.
So there may be old sailors who may be able to read it. There's that kind of sense that it could be a form of communication that maybe used to be fairly common.
And was
there's an awareness of it used to be.
Yeah, and it's probably up until the 20th century would be quite common when the history of the city's changed. I know when Paul was working on this strange commission, there was a really great member of staff in our engineering department called Steve Bode, who is the man that does the lighting. So, and I thought, naively, there was some computer program and he would just say, these are the colours I want to do, and it doesn't. Every single light on a building, I think it's 300 or so, he physically has to sit there and set the colours for each one, and then the sequence for each one. So there was quite a lot of work on his part doing this for us, but it was really interesting hearing from him about how the lights and so on work. And what we did is we had a couple of days standing in the rain, in the dark, watching the test runs in August and September. Stephen did he did a little video and did the shots and sent it to somebody that he was a member of the engineering staff who also worked in the Navy, just to check that the flags worked, and that person would say it was perfectly clear. I don't know if she asked why he was doing it, but she said it worked really well from the flag side of things too. But for us that was a really interesting thing to do, and also it makes the VG&M and what we do more visible within the institution. Now it's getting dark, by 4 o'clock you can't miss He Was Afraid, because you come around the corner and there it is blinking at you. But it's also that one of the early schemes that we looked at when we first tested with Stephen was a faster moving. He had the flags sort of animated, and it was a bit sort of disco-y, it was a bit too much. Whereas actually what we've got in the end is quite restrained. But I think really successful, and I've been really pleased with that. I suspect some other artists, now they know we've done it, might also have some proposals.
Yes.
To that.
I think Steve was quite interested in just having a proposal for it, because normally you just do something to celebrate an anniversary, a simple symbol or whatever it might be.
So it was a challenge for him as well as an engineer.
Sure.
so Rooney meeting designs. I think one thing I just wanted to ask was a bit more about the book. This is a book that Paul's recently published at the start of our exhibition, Just for the Stories. You've been working on this for quite a long time. I want to talk about it's your first sort of, I don't call it fiction. It's not an art book as such, but it's in its own genre, I suppose.
Yeah, I did a short story for Eileen Daly and Jeremy Ackerman, who sort of work together. They usually do projects involving artists who write. Well, they do now anyway, but this is one of their first projects. It was a book of short stories called The Alpine Fantasy of Victor B. It was a title of that, which may still be available. But, it was on Serpent's Tail, and I sort of approached it quite earnestly and decided to write a short story. I read a lot of short stories and thought about that as a form in a way, and I really enjoyed it. So Eileen, Jeremy and myself thought it'd be good to do something else. I think this is 2006-07, so it's taken 2008, I think, we applied for some money to do the book, so it's taken that long for it to actually happen. And it was always going to be a collection rather than all new writing. I knew that I'd be able to write some new stuff for the book, but it inevitably had to be work over a certain period of time. I think 2003 is the oldest text in it, but it just means it's more substantial publication. But it is fiction, because although a lot of the work, the writing refers to actual people and actual events, it's always fictionalised in some way, in a small way that a fictional character comes into the scene. There's always a fictional element. It's partly because I'd always started off in my work with some real, as you said, myth or real story. Or sometimes a real interview with somebody about their job or whatever, and then I'd quite often sort of either distorted that deliberately or added other elements that made it kind of fictionalised in a way. And it's partly to do with this idea of, you know, I mean, we talked about the past and the difficulty of representing it, but I'm quite also very interested in the process of making art or representing the world, and how that is incredibly manipulative, disruptive process to the world itself. In some ways, you have to actually, in order to make a work that has an autonomy to itself, you have to distort the material in some way. So it is. So the making of art can be a malevolent process as well as a kind of a force for good. So the forms of representation, the writing or the style of writing is always an important part of that. You know, how that material gets manipulated happens through, in this case, the writing, and quite often, as with the futurists and some of these works, I deliberately make it visible that a fictional process is happening.
Mm-hmm.
So in the futurist, occasionally a character will look at the camera, or I'll keep bits in that were not supposed to be shot, and so on. Or so there'll be other ways of revealing the process and being honest about the process.
So it's almost
So some of the writing, it reveals itself as kind of written, if you like, or cobbled together by a writer.
Because there are elements that you can imagine being real events, such as there's
like thin air
and thin air, where it could be real, but then you realise the little bits that have been lost to existed, or there's some kind of awareness that it is artificial. And to me, it seems in some ways quite a natural progression from a lot of the work. First, a lot of it is related to existing artwork that you have. And text is so important in so much of the work, it just seems like a really obvious thing to do. If anybody hasn't already seen the book, I'll have to stop soon. It is for sale downstairs in my shop for £8, which is a bargain. It's a limited book as well. And there's an awful lot in it. It's the kind of book that
Special
you can read
price.
again, special price. You can read it again and again, and there are links to other works by Paul. Candle Iconoclasm is in here, isn't it? Which is one of your most recent film works. There's a sort of version of that in here. So it's
2 or 3 very recent things.
So it's a really good way of finding out a bit more about Paul's work and
but I suppose to go back to your initial question, I suppose I see it as a book of stories, of a book of fiction rather than an art book of catalogue. It's not really a catalogue for work.
There are characters in it in the same way that there are characters in some of the film works, but there are stories created around those characters, and there are lots of little elements that I really like of everyday life. The Dear Guest lecture in the hotel, which is quite absurd. A couple of weeks ago I stayed in a hotel and had a ridiculous one of those, and it reminds me of that. So there are little elements of things that we encounter in everyday life, but you just like twist them, I suppose is the best way of putting it. And I think that's really good for people to respond to that, because they're things that we all encounter in different ways. And it's that everyday twisting of things that we don't expect that I think is which sets you apart from other artists. And again, I think gives people a way to respond to the work, because there's always something that they can respond to, be it a petrol station or going to the cinema or going to a really boring meeting.
In the case of the thin air piece, that it's in the form of a lecture that's why it's shown in the lecture theatre rather than in the gallery space. But all of the information in it is actual, there's true facts about Leeds College of Art and Leeds Polytechnic. But there's a fictional character whose narrative threads everything together. And although it's a lecture, it sort of forms a fairly accessible narrative, I think. And although we've talked about some of these things being a bit more fragmentary, a bit less accessible, so occasionally narrative is helpful to kind of unify things and keep people interested, especially over an hour.
Yeah.
You need something to kind of keep people going.
I think we better stop, because I just want a lunch break and we need to get back. I just wanted, does anyone have any questions in particular, points that you'd like to discuss a bit more? Yes.
I'd like to make a comment, really,
So
and
back to you.
link that to a question. For me, the petrol station is this wonderful kind of universal quality, and also the way it's presented is also very minimal, which for me I think really opens up that possibility for the individual to react. And you know, as you were saying about the future, it's the way history interacts and allows for personal interpretation. Is that really is the crux, I think, of all artistic work. I get the impression that's very strong for you as well.
Yeah, no, it's interesting you say that. A lot of the earlier work I made with video was really incredibly minimal for that reason, because I wanted the sound was quite often quite rich, but I wanted the visuals to leave a space for the viewer to engage or to think about, to use their imagination in some ways. Whereas some of these recent works have moved away from that. I think I just got a little bit tired of having nothing to look at, so I thought I'd try work with actors and having things